for instance, Arcteryx, which everybody, for the most part is familiar with Arcteryx now.
Yeah.
Nobody had any idea in 1999 when I first started working with Arcteryx what Arcteryx was. If you said Arcteryx or they saw the bird logo, they would just, what is that?
Yeah.
And so when I started working with them, they were 30 people.
Hey Islanders, and welcome to episode 132 of the Camano Voice. Today I speak with the founder of Built Design. Please welcome Carm Pierce. Hi, I'm Brandon Erickson, and you're listening to the Camano Voice podcast, where I interview folks around Camano Island and beyond. If you want to stay up to date on events, businesses, and even hear a little history of this area, subscribe to this podcast and share with your friends. Thanks for listening. Hey Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice, where we release a new episode every Tuesday. Hope your week is going well. We've had a few sunny days around here on Camano, and a little bit of rain, but actually it's been holding off, so we're going to keep crossing our fingers on that. We are halfway into March, which is crazy, but here we are. So today I get to interview Carm Pierce, who is the founder of Built Design, and we get to talk about something that I don't talk about much on the podcast as far as my favorite clothing choices and stuff like that. We get to talk about Arcteryx, which is a Northwest brand. They do a lot of mountaineering jackets, coats, any sort of like mountaineering gear, but just kind of your, I don't know, they just do a good job with their clothing. So I really enjoy their product. And his company happens to work with them on a fairly regular basis. It also has worked with companies such as Adidas, K2, and many more companies. So his company does a lot of outsourced design stuff. So we get into all of that, kind of get into how we got started with this, and how that plays also into his art background, which he's also helping with the new Stanford Camano Arts Foundation. I forget his name, sorry. Should have done better reading prior to this. But anyways, that's me. So anyways, we get into all of that and more in this podcast. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Carm Pierce. Hey Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice. Today I'm here with the founder of Built. Welcome to the podcast, Carm Pierce.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about Carm.
Well, I grew up in Snohomish, the youngest of 7 children, and we were blue collar, kind of, working class family. By the time I came around, some of my older siblings had already moved on to college or were married, and so I was on the tail end of the family. We grew up with kind of a hobby farm. Maybe like a sustenance farming, where we grew our own vegetables and fruit and had an orchard and a little vineyard and cows and pigs and ducks and chickens and all those kinds of things. And so, that was a kind of a rural experience, and growing up in that situation. My dad was a mechanic and a machinist, so I had a lot of hands-on experience at a young age with, that kind of stuff, mechanical stuff. I got my PhD in flashlight holding, early on, and how to properly hold a flashlight. So yeah, that was my upbringing, and currently I live on Camano, north end of Camano, and I've been in the Stanford Camano area since 1999.
Okay.
Yeah, I have 4 children, two girls and 2 boys, and my older 3 are all in college, so that's really affordable.
Hopefully business is going well.
Yeah, so 3 of them are, partially out of the house, and then my youngest is a freshman currently.
Okay.
So yeah, that's kind of about me.
Very cool. So, so you grew up in the Snohomish area. Did you guys grow up in the same house then your whole life then?
Yeah. My parents moved from Texas in the late 60s, before I was born, but my older 5 siblings were born in Texas, and then they moved to Washington, and were originally kind of in the Mill Creek area, but then they've been in the same house in Snohomish since 1968, and so my dad's passed, but my mom, who just turned 90 yesterday, is still living in that same house on her own. So that's pretty impressive.
That's awesome. Yeah. Very cool. So then, so you grew up kind of, learned to work with your hands and everything. So when you were kind of looking ahead at after high school, what were you kind of looking at?
Well, in high school, or from a very young age, actually, I was always interested in art, and I was always drawing. One of my older sisters kind of recognized that early on and got me into art classes with an artist in Snohomish named James Davis. So when I was a young kid, I was taking art classes in the basement of the old Snohomish Library with James Davis and doing that kind of stuff. And then my two older brothers owned a cabinet shop, so I started working there at a young age. And so it was kind of a natural thing for me to meld my artistic interest and creativity with, the mechanical upbringing. And that was also an interest as well. It always seemed to be like they fit well together. So as I, was going through high school, I started looking into paths at college, and industrial design seemed to just be kind of a natural fit because it was a combination of the creative side and of the mechanical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, so industrial design, my background is mechanical engineering, which of course I'm not using it all now, but that was my background. For industrial design, what's that kind of look like for on your guys' end then?
Yeah, so we actually have mechanical engineers on staff at Built, and they're not that different in reality as far as what a mechanical engineer would do versus an industrial designer. The industrial designer is just typically more on the front end of the process. So they're coming up with the concepts, the aesthetics, the overall functionality or user interface of whatever it is that we're designing. So, they're focused on curves and form factor and color and, marketability and those types of things, but they're still doing a lot of the mechanical design, at least in concept and how it would work and function and how someone might interact with it if it's a user product versus, mechanical engineer is going to take that pretty picture that the industrial designer creates and, gets approval from the client that, yes, that's what we want to go through. And they need to figure out, okay, how are we going to make this? And how are we going to fit all the, circuit boards inside and exactly what are the buttons made out of and what are, those types of things, the processes for manufacturing, whether it's, injection molded or metal or whatever the fabrication is. And so that's kind of the difference. They're just on the different ends of the spectrum of the development process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you were going to college then, did you find it that in your classes and stuff, were there a lot of people that were more artistic minded like yourself but were looking for a way to kind of apply it in the real world or not in the real world, but like in a mechanical sense?
Well, so I went to art school. I went to RISD, Rhode Island School of Design. Those who are familiar, it's referred to as RISD. And so it was very art-centric.
Okay.
And so one of the things with RISD is they really focus on like entrepreneurialism and those types of aspects of being an artist. And so whether you're in the industrial design department or in the illustration department or a painter or fashion or furniture design, architecture, all the programs that they kind of really focus on, okay, it's great, you can paint, but how are you going to bring that to fruition as a career? And so I think that was really helpful, and I think that the people who were in the industrial design program, they came from all different backgrounds. So some of them came from backgrounds like mine where they had a lot of mechanical experience and they understood, what things were made of and how things were made. And other people, were completely from the artistic side, and then they learned that during the process. And so versus, like a 4-year university where you're going to have a big mixture of different disciplines. Here, most people came up in an art background, and that was their point of reference. And so most of them were thinking the aesthetic side, but they learned, the mechanical and the practical side of industrial design in the education.
Yeah. Well, and that's really interesting because I don't hear of many schools of any sort that teach any sort of entrepreneurial side. Like you're kind of usually left out to dry on that side.
Yeah,
And so
I think one of the things about RISD is that I benefited from, and I think that they really do well, is they have a lot of partnerships. So their campus actually adjoins Brown University, and so there's cross registration, and you can do dual degree programs there. So if you want to get a degree in business from Brown while you get an art degree at RISD, you can do that.
Okay.
And so I took all my liberal arts outside of art history at Brown, and so that was, you kind of step out of one world, just cross the street, step out of one world and into another. And then they have lots of collaborations and exchange programs with a lot of the universities in New England. So I did a semester of business school at another university under an exchange program, and then a lot of travel abroad opportunities. So I think that they do really focus on like how can we make an artist the most well-rounded and entrepreneurial person that we can to make them successful, because there's a lot of great artists out there whose work never sees the light of day.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think that's so great because I think that is a very important piece to it, because especially for artists, because as an artist, you're everything. You have to be the producer, the maker, and then like you also have to be able to get out and market and sell. And it's not an easy job. You have to do everything, and a lot of it's hard to outsource.
Yeah, and I think that's often with artists, that's where they struggle is on their marketing aspect and how to sell and how to be everything in their business. They're a one-person business, and art's really just one part of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've got a friend who was teaching a theater class, and when they were going over marketing and sales and finances of the theater world, the class was kind of like, like it's marketing, like the evil marketers and like all this stuff. And she was like, and they were like, no, this is very important because if we don't sell tickets and we don't do this job, we don't have a job.
Right.
And so it was kind of bringing them along like, oh, money is important to some degree.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people come out of art school specifically, and then they realize that, and it's a little too late. So, to kind of round that out and start to think about those things. So, so I think that from an education standpoint, that was a really, really a major benefit to me.
Yeah.
Going through that program.
Yeah, and you said your brothers had already started a cabinetry business. So was your family pretty entrepreneurial?
Yeah, a lot of my siblings are, and so a lot of them were in, things like construction and cabinet shop and furniture and, hands-on type of things. So I do come from a background of and family that has kind of an entrepreneurial spirit, and a lot of it is, based on the maker or artistic endeavors. I have a sister who was a professional musician for years and that type of thing. So I do think that as our family kind of has a tendency towards that. Yeah.
Very cool. So then, upon graduating college, then what'd you do after that?
So I did a little longer college than most people as far as just undergraduate degree. My wife, I was married in college, and my wife was going to another school in Rhode Island, and she was a year behind me in education. And so while she was finishing up her degree, I did a second degree at RISD, a professional degree in industrial design. And so that during that time, I also had started working for a visiting professor named Steve Copeland, who had a small consultancy, and he was really focused in like the furniture business, but not in, like craft furniture. He was designing for companies like Floss, which is an Italian lighting company, and Steelcase, and which does a lot of office furniture, and those types of companies that are kind of big multinational corporations within the furniture industry. And so I had taken a couple courses with him while I was at RISD, and then he asked me to come on and work for him. And so we were actually working on some different type of projects. We had a project with Cannondale Bicycle, and we had a project with Arnold Palmer Golf that we were working on, some things like that. So I was finishing my second degree and had started working for his small consultancy. And upon graduation, he had asked me if I wanted to come on full time with his consultancy. It was actually in New Jersey, but he was in Providence at the time, running it from there. And so we went and visited and stuff, but my wife was 7 months pregnant when she graduated from college, and so she was like, I think we should go back to Washington and be around family. And so that's what we decided to do. So I came back here, and actually for about 6 months, it was a little difficult because all my connections were on the East Coast.
Yeah.
And so, I searched for jobs, and I did, a few random projects and things like that. And I ended up going to work for what was then GTE, now Verizon, in their marketing department. And I was doing everything from like yellow page layout ads to, marketing posters and postcards and stuff like that. And I did that for a little while. And then I went to work on a contract with Microsoft in their hardware group. And I did user interface design there for a while. But my interest really was kind of in the outdoor action sports, backpacks and skis and that kind of stuff.
True Northwest.
Yeah, because that's what I grew up, doing and enjoying, and so I kept on looking, and there was a company in Seattle, a consultancy, that I ended up getting hired on to in 1999, I think.
Okay.
And they're no longer. They don't exist anymore in the form they were there, but some of the people have started a new company out of that. At the time, it's called Utility, and I came in as a junior designer and was there for just under 5 years. And, at that point, I had learned a lot and made a lot of connections, and their focus was kind of in the outdoor market, and they did a lot of retail design and trade show design within that niche. And so that's kind of what got me into that industry.
Okay.
And along with personal interest in all the things that were happening in that industry. And so then that worked out well, and I worked my way up in that company, and it became evident I was living in Stanwood and commuting to South Lake Union every day. And so it became a thing where it was hard, just because of the commute and that type of stuff. And then I saw opportunities that I felt that if I went out on my own, I could service clients better and that kind of thing. So that's when I made a decision to launch Built. Okay.
Nice. So you'd had a lot of experience in that industry, but it's always different stepping out on your own and having to do it, because you're doing everything at that point. There's no team behind you. It's just you.
Yeah.
What was that like for you stepping out into that?
Well, for sure it was different and harder. In some ways, I was very fortunate in getting a good start. So one of the companies that I worked with was Cascade Designs, and at the time they were going through a merger with MSR, Mountain Safety Research, and those two companies we were doing a lot of work for, and I was working on like water filtration and headlamps and stoves, doing a lot of the MSR stoves, which is like small camping fuel.
Yeah, I've got one of those.
Yeah.
I got one of those.
I probably designed a part of it at least, and so one of the people I was working with, named Alan Mazzuda, he was my client, and I was leaving Utility, and him and I went out to lunch in Seattle, and I was informing him that I was, going out on my own, and he was like, "Well, I'm thinking about doing something different." So, right from the beginning, he came on board, and then we had some clients that I had worked with, W.L. Gore and Associates that makes Gore-Tex and Marmot, and a few others that when I left, they just basically said, "We're coming with you," and so that was a really good launching pad to kind of have another person and some good contracts right out of the gate. And so that helped us out, and it was basically 2 years of just Alan and I, working. We'd like have our meetings in the morning. We would design in the afternoon. We'd do production at night, and we borrowed a shop from my father-in-law in a basement of a place he owned, and we were making stuff, and doing that. So it was pretty, full startup mode. Not a lot of sleep for about 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you guys did you did the meetings, design, and when you guys were in production stuff, were you guys building like prototypes of like what you think it would be, or what was that?
I mean, it's all over the board. As a consultancy, you're basically whatever the project is that the client brings to you is what you do. And so sometimes it's doing prototypes of a product, and so we're designing and working out, helping with getting prepped for manufacturing and all that type of stuff. So you might be doing mock-ups of a product and sending that out. Other things are we were doing a lot of the retail design and store design, and so for instance, W. Gore & Associates had a running apparel brand and a biking Gore Bikewear biking apparel brand, and they placed an order for like 100 fixtures that go in a store to hang their product on, and so we're building those fixtures, in a basement.
Oh, my word!
Yeah, so it was kind of crazy, amazing that we both still have all our fingers, working on the saws and everything in the middle of the night to fulfill that order. So it was a little bit of everything, we just we didn't know what we were doing. We were just getting it done and doing what we had to.
Yeah. So that's crazy. So when you guys are as a consultancy, then a lot of times people come to you and it's more than that. They want you to do the run and everything. Then
yes, it's everything from we have clients. We worked like for K2 for 9 consecutive years. We did all of their snowboard bindings and a lot of their boots and helmets and ski poles and their line of Apache skis. And some of those projects, they, especially after we worked for them for a long time, the value that we brought to them was just like on the very front end for concepts, how a curve meets another line on a helmet or something like that.
Yeah.
So they would just have us do nothing but hand sketches.
Okay.
They'd just say, hey, we want 30 hand sketches. And they would give us a design brief, and the design brief might say, this helmet is going to be, marketed to a demographic of a certain age group, and we have some reference inspiration material, and we need it to, obviously pass all the standards for protection, and we want it to have integrated sound or, whatever the parameters are. And then they'd say, do us 30 hand sketches, and we would just do that and hand it off back to them, and then their team internally, their engineers, would take our hand sketches and they'd start to bring it into 3D and work out all the specifics. Other times they say, we want tooling ready drawings. We want you to design the helmet, but we want you to then go through all the 3D modeling. We want you to make prototypes, and at that time, this was back in the early 2000s when we were doing a lot of that. We were building the form factors out of clay and sculpting the helmets, and then carrying this big clay helmet on a board to meetings and stuff like that, and then even just carving them in meetings to get all the small details of the form down and that kind of thing. And so it was just a different process then, but in some of those cases we brought it all the way through to manufacturing, and would it might even still be at their own factory, but held the hand all the way through the process till parts were coming off the production line.
Okay.
So, all parts of the process, and sometimes it just depends on what the client needs are.
Yeah, that's very cool. How did you get in touch with because some of these are like very big brands and stuff like K2. Mm-hmm. You guys have worked with some other big brands. How did you get in touch with them, and how does that process go?
Well, the one, if you ski and climb and hike and you do all that, you meet some people organically through that, mm-hmm. Just being in the outdoors. And the outdoor industry, especially when I started in the late 90s, was a very small industry. And so, for instance, Arcteryx, which everybody, for the most part, is familiar with Arcteryx now.
Yeah.
Nobody had any idea in 1999 when I first started working with Arcteryx what Arcteryx was. If you said Arcteryx or they saw the bird logo, they would just, what is that?
Yeah.
And so when I started working with them, they were 30 people.
Okay.
And I knew the people who were there right at the beginning of forming the company. It was actually initially a different name, and some individuals that had a climbing shop up in Whistler were involved right at the beginning, and became friends with them, and we did a few projects together, and so it just kind of blossomed from there. So now Arcteryx is, I don't know, it's 600 and something employees, and they have 130 stores worldwide or something. And so that was kind of one of those things where maybe we stumbled into it more. If I walked off the street today to Arcteryx and said, "Hey, I want to work for you," they'd probably say, "Go away." But I've been working for them for 20-something years, and so that's how that relationship kind of came about. And once you're in that industry and you go to a few of the outdoor trade shows and the events, and people move within the industry. Most of them are in that industry because it's a lifestyle choice more than like, "Hey, I got offered a job," and they're not there for other career reasons. They're people who loved the outdoors, and then they ended up in the outdoor industry because of that. And so I'd say it's more relationship based than a lot of other industries. We've worked in the medical industry, we've worked in the high tech industry, and it's completely different than working in outdoor action sports lifestyle industry, just because we do zero business development basically for our business, which is nice, and it's all just based on relationships we've built over the years. And so and people move within the industry, and then a lot of the companies are kind of centralized in certain locations. So there's a lot of outdoor companies in a certain part of France. There's a lot of outdoor companies in Boulder and Denver area, a lot of outdoor companies, in the Seattle area. And so, and then also, in Salt Lake City and Ogden, Utah. So because of that, people move around, and that's really how our business grew was, an individual VP of marketing from one company, moved to another company, and they brought us along with them.
Okay. Very cool. So when you work in these other industries like the tech industry or medical, is it always kind of a breath of fresh air or whatever for you guys when you get to come back and work back on the mountain stuff?
Yeah, I mean, we run a lot of projects at a time. We probably run between 45 and 55 projects at a time. So we always have a lot going on, and a portion of those are always still in the outdoor industry. Every once in a while, we end up outside the industry for some reason. Somebody calls us and says, "Hey, we want you to work on projects." So those aren't bad projects. They're just a lot different.
Yeah.
And so the way that they run is typically maybe a little more formal than what we're used to.
Yeah.
As far as it goes. So I think that it's just there's less emphasis on the bottom line in the outdoor industry. Not that it doesn't count and matter, but there's a lot of decisions made within the outdoor industry that aren't just about profitability.
Yeah.
Where you get outside of that, from our experience, and that's less true. So, those projects are great, and they're usually more profitable, and because those companies have more money to spend on R&D. But at the same time, we're always happy that we're centered in the industry that we're in.
Yeah. So for a company like Arcteryx, then what aspect would you guys work on with them?
So we've done a little bit of everything. And so, we're easy. Whatever they ask us to do, we're willing to do it most times. So we've done a lot of work on their brand stores, but they didn't have any brand stores. Stores that have the Arcteryx logo on the outside. When we started working with them, they didn't have any stores that were branded Arcteryx. They were, wholesale only. So they were selling in REIs and MECs and in small, climbing shops and stuff like that. And so a lot of times, early work that we were doing was, around branding. So it might be graphics and developing, some of the campaigns that they were wanting to launch about a new product. A lot of it was in-store merchandising. So, how do we best display our new featured jacket? And we want to design and develop a display that highlights it and calls out all the features and benefits. And, when somebody walks in the store, they're drawn to that. And so how do we tell that story? And then, that culminates in a physical display that has to be executed. So a lot of our work was that type of stuff. And then product development. So on occasion, we would work on a lot of times a product, you don't develop the whole product. They might say, hey, we're developing a new climbing harness and we need to figure out this attachment or a closure or things like that. So on occasion with Arcteryx, we would work on, those types of things. We don't do a lot of product-specific development for Arcteryx like we did for K2 for years. And so it runs the gamut. Whatever they ask us to do, we typically, are willing and have enough expertise to do that for them.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, because I'm in the retail space, then, what were some of the interesting things that you guys had to learn and figure out as you guys? Because you said you designed some retail stuff, not just for Arcteryx, but some of the stores for other companies and stuff like that. What were the things that you guys found as important factors when designing a retail store?
Well, I mean, when I was at utility, that was a lot of what I was doing, and so it usually starts on how do people interact with the space. So floor plan, flow. How do people circulate? Mm-hmm. What do people look at? How long do they look at it? So a lot of times when you have something, you only really have 3 seconds of someone's time as they walk past something to grab their attention. And so a lot of the initial work within a retail space has to do more with human behavior and how people interact in an environment like that. So there's a fair amount of research that goes into a lot of that. We've been doing it for a long time, so we don't necessarily go through the research phase on every project because we have a pretty good grasp of how that plays out. So then the process is understanding the brand, and one of the nice things about our clients is we've worked with most of them long term, and so we have a really good understanding of their brand and their brand standards and their brand ethos, and so I think that's important as well. And obviously, their ultimate goal is to increase sales per square foot within their retail location, and so understanding the brand, understanding shopping behaviors or customer behaviors, and then turning that into a concept that captures that, so that then they have the benefit of a good design that functions well and speaks to their brand and is easy to merchandise and easy to sell and easy to update based on new campaigns and that type of thing. And so that's kind of our approach. We go through a conceptual design process, present it to the client. They come back with feedback. We go through sometimes multiple rounds of design development, get everything dialed into what is going to work good for that particular location and their brand, and then execute that if that's under our task is to build it. So a lot of times we're building furniture and we're building custom elements that go into these stores. We do a lot of work for Red Wing Shoes, and so the store that we designed and built in Manhattan is very different than when we design and build in a strip mall in a rural community. And so the one in Manhattan has a big sculpture that we built out of their old leather dies and stuff that hangs from the ceiling and that kind of stuff. So it depends on location a lot and what their clients or customers kind of demographic is, where they're coming from, how much disposable income they might have depending on where it's located. So there's a lot of thought and factors that go into designing a retail location.
Very cool. So then, as far as where Built is at now, what does your kind of typical day look like?
So, I went to design school, and that's what I did. Was day to day was working on design, but I haven't done that much in a long time. My day to day is client contact, and 200, 300 emails a day, and writing proposals and quotes and those types of things, traveling to projects and making sure that everything is going as planned and coming along on site and those types of stuff. So yeah, I mean, my day to day looks much more like a business owner's, day to day, and unfortunately, I'm terrible at it. So I'm a bad people manager, and I'm fine at running, the business, and I enjoy the client contact, but a lot of times I lament that I'm not doing design and that type of stuff. So my day to day is the typical business owner going 100 different directions, doing 100 different things, and trying to make it all come together.
Yep.
In the end.
Yeah, very cool. I definitely find that as a as business owner, but as I've seen people transition from like a barista or like certain positions, and they move into a manager level. They no longer get to do what they were good at and why you brought them to the manager level. And so it's a whole different world that they have to learn and understand.
Yeah, it is. And, sometimes I still try to interject myself into the design process or, into that type of stuff. Or I go down and, build one of the pieces of furniture, do some welding just because it's nice to then, be reminded okay.
Yep. Still can do this.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I want to switch gears a little bit then. So apart from owning and starting Built, you're also helping with the Camano Stanwood Art Center. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about what the goal is for that project?
Sure. So the Stanwood Camano Art Advocacy Commission was started by, I think, Jason Dorsey and Carla Matsky were the early people that had the idea. I only came on board with it a little over a year ago, and their mission is building community by partnering, educating, celebrating, and advocating for the arts. And so I think the framework of the commission was to kind of bring all the factions of art groups and artists in the Stanwood Camano community together with a common community vision. Mm-hmm. So when I came on, they had just started discussing an art center and the potential of an art center, and so I got involved in that because I have a background in building, and I've designed and built a few houses and other structures, and completely had renovated our old brick building in Everett that our businesses run out of, and those types of things. So, and I did a lot of architecture in school, so I was kind of a natural fit to be involved with the Art Center project. And so I have gone through the process of, starting to work on that and interviewing architects and getting through initial design phases on what that art center is going to be. Not only from a programming standpoint, like how is it going to be used, and what are the general space divisions and what should be in that art center from kind of a macro view, but then also, getting into the logistics of designing and building the physical building. And so that's all in process, and we're still working on it, and there's not a lot, of fidelity or concrete things to share on the art center itself. Other than that, it is, something that's being worked on, and hopefully it comes to fruition in the next couple of years. But it's a long-term process. But the commission is doing great stuff. A lot of the local artists and business community are involved in it. Just this morning we had a commission meeting and a board meeting, and there's just a lot of excitement and a lot of involvement, and the city of Stanwood is involved as well. And so there's just a lot of great initiatives happening with that, with art education and around marketing of all the artist shows and studios and all those kinds of things. And so I think the commission's hope is that we're able to promote the area to even flourish more as an art community and become kind of a destination within the region, not only for artists, but for those who are looking to get involved with art and purchase art and have a place to go to view art and that kind of stuff. So it's exciting, and there's a lot of activity going on, and we did just hire an executive director, Kat Olson, who I think that you know.
Oh, very cool.
And so she's a new executive director, and so that's a big step to have first staff member, and So yeah, we're moving along and doing good things, and more will come out as far as what exactly the art center's going to look like in the future over the next few months.
Yeah, very cool. I actually, I just saw her announcement a few weeks ago about her closing down Co-Host. But just like a quick shout out to her. Throughout this entire pandemic and everything that's gone on, she started a event center in downtown Stanwood right as the pandemic hit. And so she, like most businesses, had to pivot, like, oh, we'll do online ordering, we'll do this. Her entire business model got thrown out the window when the pandemic hit. And her positivity and her enthusiasm of just continuing on and making a new way forward with all that she was doing was just super inspiring watching it day in, day out, because the last 2 years has not felt like 2 years. It's felt much longer, and it didn't matter. Every time she jumped on and she was, reaching out to people, it was this very positive, look what we're doing. This is a new thing that we're going to try. And
yeah, I think that I've only got to know her recently, but I think that a lot of that you just described is why we feel that she's such a great fit for the commission, is that she brings that enthusiasm, that can-do spirit, and a lot of what she was doing with Co-Host translates directly to what we want to do with the art commission and with the art center eventually. And so I think that she's going to be a great leader for the organization, and I know that she really enjoyed Co-Host, but I think that she's looking at this new challenge as a even bigger opportunity, kind of doing what she had already envisioned within the community. Yeah,
that's awesome. I'm so happy for her. That's awesome. So with all of that, then, do you guys have any idea of like a completion date? Not obviously not like a finish date, but like a projected, like, is it 2 years, 3 years down the road?
I don't, but it's at least probably 2 to 3 years down the road before there would be an art center in place and that's hosting shows and events and things like that. Mm-hmm. I think in our minds we have a pretty grand idea of what this is going to be, and so it's a big project and there's a lot to figure out. And so. It's probably at least 2 years, and I wouldn't be surprised, if it's 3 or 4 years on that. And the commission has hired an architect that's working on the project, and so kind of going through all the planning phase and stuff like that. So Olson Kundig, they're out of Seattle, and they're a really well known firm, and so they've been great helping us kind of get moving on the planning stages and all that for it.
Yeah, well, especially the way supplies and everything and labor, there's so much there that's like, even once you guys are ready to go, then it's like, okay, well, we can start this in 6 months or.
And, the board and the commission, we're all volunteers. And so, it's one of those things where we have 30 or 40 people all working on it, but we're doing it in, our spare time and as we can. And so that also tends to hinder the process a little bit as far as speed goes, but everybody's super invested, and so I believe it's going to happen and be really great.
Nice. So with all this then, have you stepped back into, because you said you had some art background when you were growing up as a kid, mm-hmm. and then you kind of went into industrial design, but from an art perspective, have you kind of picked back up certain forms?
Well, I mean, I've always painted and drawn, kept that going. When I was at RISD, I took a lot of coursework that was, fine art related or was fine painting courses, drawing courses, those types of things. And, I've continued to do that. I do a fair amount of furniture design and building. I have a sawmill here on the island.
Okay.
And so, I'm kind of the jack of all trades, master of none artist where I do like to use it as a creative outlet, but I'm not just, I'm not painting every day or anything like that. I'm also on the board for the Shack Art Center in Everett.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, I'm pretty immersed in the arts community as far as that goes, being on the board there and being on the board of the Stanford Camano Art Advocacy Commission, and then a couple other nonprofit boards. And so it's, I think it's a good balance for me because I really am more inclined towards the mechanical, practical side of of art with my business and industrial design and stuff like that. But fine art painting specifically is a great outlet. Just to, I might do like 3 a year or something like that. Yeah, and they're usually because I'm under duress because the Shack or somebody says, "Hey, we need you to donate a painting for an auction or something." So then I do a painting and donate it. So that's what most of so that's good. It's always good to be prodded a little bit.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I like to end every podcast with some rapid fire questions. So the first one is, what purchase of $100 or less have you enjoyed the most in the last 3 months?
Well, I think you might have to adjust that for inflation.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
It's funny because I asked my wife, I said, what have I bought for $100 or less in the last 3 months? And she said, I don't think anything. You're a big ticket item person. I don't go to the grocery store. I don't buy basically anything. But thinking about it, I had a nice dinner at Shima with my wife, and it was right around $100. So I think that experience of just a nice quiet dinner, it was probably the best $100 purchase I've had in the last 3 months.
Nice.
I did buy a couple koi for my koi pond, but that was back in the fall, maybe a little longer than 3 months ago.
Okay.
And those are always, it's fun. It's relaxing to just go out there with my fish. During the winter, they're kind of hibernating, but most of the time, go out, feed them, and that's kind of a relaxing, setting to enjoy also.
Yeah. Nice. Very cool. Yeah, I love Shima. In fact, it was earlier this week. I texted my wife and I said, we haven't gone to Shima in a while. When do we want to do Shima? And then I texted right after that, tonight? Great. Sounds good. Well, I'll pick it up.
Yeah.
So,
it's nice to have that quality.
It's great.
Sandwich, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. So, all right. Who is the most influential person in your life outside of your family?
My art teacher in high school is probably that person. Her name was Susan Russell. She's passed from cancer a few years ago, but it's interesting. I was in high school in Snohomish. They had a freshman either at the middle school or freshman campus, so you came into the high school in your sophomore year. And I remember I was in just a regular art class in my sophomore year. I wasn't that involved in art in school. Most of my art training had been, in like private art lesson setting. And so I was in this art class, just like, I don't remember what it was called. It wasn't beginner art, but it was equivalent to, beginning art class with a teacher named Mr. Moe. And all of a sudden, this lady that's about 6 foot tall with bright red hair and like Chuck Taylor Converse on, she busts in the door and she says, "Where is he?" And, and Mr. Moe goes, "Who?" "The boy I heard about." And I was sitting in the very back row, and we were working on like woodblock prints or something like that. And she and Mr. Moe says, "Oh, he's back there." And he says, "Carm, raise your hand." And so I did, and she comes back and she grabs me by the arm and she says, "You're coming with me." And so she pulled me right out of that class, and she was the AP art teacher, and she also taught calligraphy and some other classes. And she brought me into her class, and she says, "Okay, you're going to be in my AP art class. You're going to TA for me this period and this period." And essentially just hijacked my entire high school art career. And so, I don't know how many. I spent a lot of time in her classroom over the next 3 years. And she had done a summer teaching program at RISD. And she says, "You're going to go to RISD." And so I said, "Okay, I don't even know what that is." And so then she got the wheels in motion. She made sure that I had all the stuff lined up to do that. At the time, you submitted 20 slides and 3 original drawings and the essay along with your application and stuff like that. And so basically for 2 years, she worked with me.
Wow.
It's the only school I applied to. And she worked with me on that, prepping me to go to RISD for my art education. And during that time, she was fighting cancer, and she would teach school from a bed that they brought in to the classroom. And so she had like a little office off the classroom, and she not only taught from that, and the certain days she missed when she was undergoing treatments and that kind of thing, but then she would stay after and have me stay after almost, I don't know how many days, at least 3 or 4 days a week, and work on stuff on the side and prepping for my college application and doing my drawings and reviewing them. And then I'd bring them into her, and she'd be laying on the bed, and she would critique them and all that kind of stuff. And then, I applied to RISD, and I got in, and not only got in, I got almost a full scholarship there. And then we stayed, fast friends after, and she was always, coming to my house, and I was going to her house and having dinners, and she taught all my children. She had a little art studio out of her garage in Everett, and so just super great, mentor. And then when I started Built, she was like the first one there. She she talked me into running a art gallery for 3 years out of the company, and she'd like help hang the shows, and she was like the biggest promoter. And then she moved to Portland a few years ago with her husband Falcon, and she'd still, every time she'd come up, she'd come see me, and we'd have lunch and that kind of stuff. And I probably have, I think, 24 of her paintings or something like that. She was a great artist also, really great at calligraphy and those types of things. And so I think now there's a scholarship named after her that the Shack gives every year. She was so into art education. So at her memorial after she passed away, on her third kind of time around with cancer, the memorial is just person after person basically saying that she was the biggest influence in their lives. So I think same for me, that she saw somebody, and she just basically took over and made it happen, and that's kind of rare, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. That was actually going through my head when you were talking about RISD. I was like, how on earth did you go from Washington to applying over there?
Yeah, because of Susan. Yeah.
Very cool. All right. The next question is, it's a fill in the blank question. So it's, I know this is weird, but I've always wanted to blank.
Well, I've, so with my work, I've traveled a lot, and made maybe 40 trips to Asia, and done projects on 5 different continents. And so I always think, I could move here. And so I think that for me, I've always wanted to just pick up and move to a completely unfamiliar 180 degree from what I'm used to culture, and just live there for 2 or 3 years and immerse myself in it. And so I haven't done that, but I plan to at some point in my life. Just basically dump myself into an unfamiliar place for a few years, and so I think that's probably something I've always wanted to do.
Yeah, that sounds great. All right, who's an interesting or fascinating person that I should interview next?
I know you've had a lot of people on already, but I think there's a lot more people in the area. David Casera has a gallery in Stanwood. Dan Nelson, that owns Design Northwest, the architect here in town. It's funny, one of the people I thought of was Jordan Sneva, and he was the track and cross-country coach for several years at Stanwood. And he's now the athletic director, I think, up in Mount Vernon.
Okay.
And he lives up in Mount Vernon, but he's so involved, or was for many years, in Stanwood Camano. And he's like one of the most positive people that I've ever met. And he still sends my children postcards of like encouragement. Even he doesn't even work for Stanwood. He's not a teacher at Stanwood High School anymore. He's not involved, and he a postcard shows up in the mail just saying, "Hey, bet you're doing great. Keep it up the good work and those types of things. And so, I think he was one of the big influences with my children as they went through the school system. That was such a positive person that the kids really related to and really helped them along in their journey. So I think he'd be really interesting to talk with. There. And there's lots of other people. There's there's lots of young people that are interesting that could be good to get their perspective growing up on the island. I think of my daughter Karina. She's my oldest daughter. She's in medical school down in Oregon, and she always says, "Oh, I come back to Camano just because it's like my decompression place. It's such a great place to be." So interviewing someone who's grew up here and then has moved away and still in their young 20s type of thing would be interesting. Yeah. One other person, Sam Fairley. He's director of engineering for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and he lives on the island. And I met him on the bus 20-something years ago, commuting to Seattle. And he's a really fascinating person. He played football for Auburn, and he's now on the board for the Art Commission, and really fun to talk to. So yeah, lots of people.
Awesome, sounds good. All right, and lastly, what piece of advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
I think that I would tell my 20-year-old self to enjoy the process and the journey, because it's really as important and as fulfilling as the end result. So, sometimes when you're young, you have this, you have a vision in your head of what you're going to make or do in the next 10 or 20 years, and you're going to have the family and a house and a job and a career, or whatever it is that your particular interests are, and then you kind of forget about the journey getting there. And so for me, when I look back, and I'm starting to think about retiring and what what that looks like, that the journey and all the process and the things that I learned along the way were actually the best parts of the last 28 years for me, since I was 20. And so I think that's what I would tell my 20-year-old self.
Very cool. Well, thank you. I know you're a busy guy. You've got a lot going on. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today.
Thanks, Brandon.
Yeah. And Islanders, I will talk to you on the next one. Well, a big thank you to Carm Pierce for joining me on the podcast today, and thank you for listening. If you haven't already, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us be found by other Islanders like yourself. And for more information on this episode, go to CamanoCommons.com/podcast. That's CamanoCommons.com/podcast. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.